Hello and welcome to Craft with Sarah. In this video, we are taking a look at layered designs with a Cricut, but with a little bit of a difference, and little is the operative word there. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, what do you actually do with layered designs once they're made? And I get it, they are quite big. It's hard to know what to do with them. I like just putting them up on my wall as is, a bit of blue tack or command strips on the back, or you can prop them up on a shelf or stand them up. Or one of the actual most common things to do with them is to frame them in a shadow box, something like this. But let's face it, you've only got so much wall space, right? There's only so much that you can actually frame and put up on your walls. So here is a way to take the same designs that you know and love, but give them even more use by making them super small. Look at this. It's only 3 inches tall, super small. And the Cricut cut it out absolutely perfectly from cardstock. Even the details in the hat and the knitting. I'm just going to grab a Cricut Cutie. If you've got one of these from any of the Cricut mystery boxes, you know the size of them. This is that size, super tiny. Cutting the layered designs a bit smaller gives you more opportunities to use them. For example, at this size, you could put a magnet on the back and turn it into a fridge magnet. You could put a brooch on it and you could wear it. You might want to cover it with some sort of coating if you're going to do that in case it gets wet. Or you could put it onto a greetings card. Of course, you could add it to a card at a much larger size too, but if you like to make the little A2 size cards, or if you're in the UK, an A6 card, or 5x7 inch, then making them smaller is going to give you lots more opportunities to use them on your cards. And best of all, it's easier than you think. Another great reason for cutting these smaller is they're cheaper to make because it uses far less supplies. In fact, you might not even need any new sheets of cardstock. You could just dive into your scrap pile and use some of those to cut it out. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to make the layered designs smaller and some tips for cutting them out with cardstock to make sure that it cuts beautifully. And then we're going to go one step further and take one of my giant sign paper crafts and make a smaller version of that too. Now this was originally designed to be 20.5 inches wide, and it comes in sections that you stick together, so it cuts 4 separate bits and then they're together to make the giant sign. And I love making these. They make such an impact in your room or your home when they're displayed. But again, sometimes you just might not have the space for them, or you might not want to invest in so many sheets of cardstock. You ready? Here's a smaller version. So this little one is only 4.5 inches tall and about 8 3/4 inches wide compared to the 20.5 of this one. So you can see just how small it is. And for this one, I've cut the text from heat transfer vinyl rather than the big cardstock, just because it's a little bit easier for sticking. I'll also show you how you can join those bottom bits into one, because we don't need to cut that in 4 sections if it's going to be this size. It can all go as one to make it easier and quicker. These designs still look lovely when stuck together with foam squares. This one has all the same foam squares layers as this one. It just looks a little bit more dramatic with everything smaller. But you can simplify it too. For example, on this one, everything is glued apart from the hands and the nose, which just have one layer of foam square in them that you can't really see. But it still looks really dimensional just because it's so tiny. Here's another comparison. So this one is much thicker. It's got way more layers of foam in, but you don't really need it as much for the smaller designs. So what are you waiting for? Come with me and dive into Design Space. Oh, where's she going? And we'll see how to make these teeny tiny. Let's start by looking at some layered designs. So we've got the gnome that I was showing you just now, and then also a Labrador dog, which comes with lots of flowers and details in it. And we'll look at a couple of different ways that we might be able to make this a bit smaller. For the gnome, the one I showed you was 3 inches tall, so we can type 3 into the height box. Make sure the padlock icon is closed, and then when you press enter on your keyboard, the width changes in proportion. So this is just 2.652 inches tall. You can see it a little better by zooming in. And actually, this one was fine to cut out all of the layers, but if you're not feeling quite so adventurous, you can make them a little simpler by hiding some of the details. If we open up the layers by clicking the arrow in the layers panel, you can have a look through and see if there's anything you might be able to skip. On this one, I think probably the hat with the pattern in, that's going to be one of the trickier things to cut. You could hide that and just cut a plain hat to make it easier. You could do similar with the wool too, and take off the pattern on that one, although then it doesn't quite look as much like a ball of wool. So actually you might want to keep those on just because it makes it look a little bit more obvious what it is. The hair is another thing that you could possibly take off the details on. So whatever design you're trying to make small, have a look through the layers, see if there's anything you can take out that you don't mind how it looks, but you'll probably surprise yourself at what the Cricut actually can do this small, and that hat definitely was possible. Now we'll take a look at the dog. This has lots of detailed pattern in, and if I was making this small, I definitely wouldn't want to cut all of those. If we make it the same height as the gnome, see, this is how that's going to end up. And when we were looking at the gnome, the gaps in the hat and the knitting was very small. This is even smaller and the lines are thinner. So I think this probably would be a little bit too much. So what you could do again is look down the layers panel and click into all of the flower layers and either hide them by hovering over them in the layers panel and pressing the I, or click on that layer in the layers panel and press the delete key on your keyboard or the little trash can icon up there to delete them. So that is now already looking much easier. When I'm doing the layered designs and they are going out small, then I tend to glue all the bits together rather than using foam squares for dimension, because they're so small anyway. Even just gluing them makes them look like they've got lots of depth in. For example, when I showed you the gnome, that was all glued together apart from the hands and the nose, and it still looked wonderfully deep and dimensional and lovely. So you could definitely do the same with this Labrador here. And you could maybe even take off a couple of extra layers, perhaps that front leg, if you wanted to make it even simpler, or that one, but then it gets a little bit weird in this area. So I probably would keep that one. And then when you glue these bits together, it will show all the shadowing between the different layers and it will look lovely. One thing to watch out for is tiny things like eyes. So I've just clicked on one of these eyes and it is 0.091 of an inch, so not even 1/10 of an inch. That is super small. There are a couple of things you could do. I mean, you could cut it out and I think it would work because it's a circle, it's fairly easy. You might just find that you can't actually see those whites of the eyes because that is like ridiculously small. So what I would probably do is hide the black eyes and change the white ones to be black. It looks a bit weird on the screen because this is still showing quite big as I'm zoomed in, but when it's actually 3 inches tall, you see that kind of looks okay with the smaller eyes. But even still, gluing those on is going to be tricky. Another thing you could do if you don't fancy sticking them on that small is you could change them to a pen layer black pen and have the Cricut draw them on instead. So draw them, it'll draw the outline, and then you could colour them in with that pen to fill them in. That way you don't have little tiny eyes to stick on with glue. You do need to remember to attach them to whatever you're drawing on. So click on your layered design, ungroup all the layers by pressing the ungroup button. Select the two things that you have set to draw. So on mine it's the eyes. So I press the shift key to select both of them, and also the head layer here. And then at the bottom of the layers panel, press attach. Attach is what tells the Cricut where we would actually want it to draw. And then you can drag it back down to where it goes in the layers panel. So that's one other option. I know it looks really creepy on the screen because you can just see the outline. Another thing you can do, which won't always work, it depends on your design, but what we could do is to cut these little circles out of the head. Rather than having them as little circles to stick on, we'll make them as holes and then stick a bit of black behind it. So again, to do that, you would need to ungroup the layers and then find the two eyes, and I'll weld these together into one layer. So press combine and weld to join them together. Then we can click on that, press shift and choose the head, and then either slice them to cut them out, or you can go combine and then subtract, and that will remove them. So now if I move this over, you see we have a hole in the head where the eyes were going to be. And I can drag that down, back down. Here's where it goes. Come on. There we go. But now we would need to add the colour behind that. So to do that, we'll click on the head layer and then press your Alt key on your keyboard and wiggle the mouse a little bit with it over the head on your main canvas. So not over here in the layers panel, you want your cursor to be on the actual design. Press Alt, move a little bit, and then your cursor will change to get a plus icon. You can click, single click, left click on the mouse, and it will make a copy. At the top, we've now got a copy. And we can change that to black, and then drag that down to underneath where we took the eyes out. And now this will cut these two shapes instead, which will be much easier to glue together because we glue this one on first and then glue that one on top, and it will show the eyes. So no more teeny tiny circles to stick on. And the other benefit is that, you know, they're going to be in exactly the right spot because it's pre-cut out. And you could do the same kind of thing with the eyebrows, because on this particular one, the eyebrows are also cutouts. So on this one, actually, this would be pretty easy. I'll just weld them together and then drag them into that same subtract, and that will cut them out. Although now it's going to show black behind it, which we don't want. So we can fix that. Let's duplicate that one again. I'm going to put this just at a random colour so that you can see what I'm doing. Drag it down. And then let's duplicate the eyebrows in place. And put them in front of the black. Bring forward. And then subtract them out of the black. So then that's going to show a gap through. And then that will go right above the orange, which I'll change back now to the main doggy colour. Turn that back on. And now we've got 3 layers. So we've got 1, 2, 3. Much easier to cut out than those tiny shapes. And then you've got a much bigger surface area to glue together to add them on and still see all of the details through. It might take a little bit of practicing before you get used to doing these steps in Design Space, but it really does help to put a little bit of extra time in at the beginning to make things easier to cut if you're doing them super small. Another thing you could do with this design, if you wanted to make a Labrador, but you weren't particularly fussy about having the body in, is you could delete the body layers and just cut the head and make that a little bit bigger. So for example, if we group him again, duplicate, you could look through and delete the body layers and just have the head and then make that a little bigger so it'll be easier to cut. And then you probably could still do the whites of the eyes. I've deleted them from this, so I can't add them back in. But you could have the original eyes on there rather than the little black holes. This is still only 1.86 inches wide, but obviously a lot bigger than what you could do if it had the body attached. So if you do have a layered design that you want to do small, but it's only one particular bit of it you really, really like, you could try separating that from the rest of the design. It might not always work. It depends how the layering is done. But in this case, and for most of my dog and cat designs, if you've not seen them, I do have over 200 dogs and about 30 different cats, all different breeds, available in my shop at craftwithsarah.com/shop. A little bit of promo in there, but you can take the heads off and separate them for all those designs. So you could do that instead. If you're making a little greetings card, for someone that has a Labrador, for example, then a little head would look just as nice on there with some backgrounds and things as the whole thing. So there's a couple of options for general layered designs. And next we'll take a look at my giant signs and making those smaller. One type of paper craft project that I really enjoy making is giant off-the-mat signs, and I've designed quite a lot of these for different occasions over the last few years. One of my favourites has to be this one though, which was my giant spring sign, and the idea of this is you cut it from cardstock, you add your custom message along here, and then it can go on a door or up on a wall or propped up on a shelf. When I click this, you can see the size. It is almost 20.5 inches wide and 10.5 inches tall. That's obviously way bigger than a Cricut can regularly cut. And the reason it works is that the big layers on the bottom are cut into sections. Open up the layers panel and I'll scroll down. There's loads of bits in this design, all those flowers. But if we go down to the very bottom, you can sort of see what I mean. As I click through these 4 bottom layers, it's highlighting a different part on the design because the very bottom green actually comes in 4 different parts. And that's how we can cut something that is over 20 inches wide from regular A4, US letter, or 12 by 12 cardstock. But what if you want to make it really small? Well, you can certainly do that, and you could even do it just by typing in a smaller number and cutting it like this. But if you do that, it's still going to cut all of these bottoms in sections. It's going to be really hard to stick together because they're going to take a long time to line up. And also, there's not really a lot of point in cutting it in 4 sections when it would fit on a regular sized bit of paper. So if you want to make one of the layered giant signs smaller, then I would thoroughly recommend welding together those bottom pieces into one. I'll show you how to do it. Zoom in a bit. First, I'm going to click on the design, go right up to the top and hide everything by clicking the eye icon that appears when I hover over the main group in the layers panel. Click again and then ungroup the layers by pressing the ungroup button up here. Now we can scroll all the way down to the bottom and turn on those bottom 4 layers. So this is how it actually looks with 4 pieces. They all overlap a little bit. You've got these triangles which show you where to stick it together so it will all line up. You may want to zoom in a little bit more so that you can check the edges because they might not always be lining up 100%. just because obviously, you know, it's designed to be cut from different sheets of cards. So you might want to click on some of them individually and use the arrow keys on your keyboard just to shift them about a bit to make them line up a little better. So that one is looking good now. Then drag a box around everything that's showing and go combine and weld. That will join it into one layer. So now when I click it, it's just one piece here. We can take out these guide triangles now, they're no longer needed. So to do that, press Contour and then click into those guides. Oh, I just clicked the wrong thing. Click into those little triangles. I clicked the wrong one again. And then that will fill them in. You might also want to click on any other little gaps, maybe that one in there, that'll end up really small. But now this bottom bit will cut nicely at a smaller size. This is actually much bigger than the one I showed you at the beginning. I've just chosen a random number of 10 inches. We need to move this back to the bottom. So click it and go Arrange, Center Back. And you might want to give it a name by double clicking and typing in the layers panel just so that you know this is one you've changed. Hide it and then have a look and see what you've got next. So now I've got these four. If I go one more, that's starting a different colour, so I don't want that one yet. I'm going to do a similar thing on this one. Drag a box around them all because they all look pretty well lined up. You will get lines like this where they're overlapping, that's okay. That's because the four pieces all need to overlap so that you can glue them together nicely. Go combine and weld, and that will join them together. There's a teeny tiny little gap here, which I think I'll contour out. It's fine when it's really big, but when you make it smaller, that will end up teeny tiny. And then we can go Arrange, Center Back, drag it above the one we already changed. Come on, go in the middle. There we go. And call that Edited 2. And then just keep going. This will be my next one. All these big bits that come in sections we can join together. Take out some of those teeny tiny holes. Move it to the back. And then move it above the two we've already edited. And then that would be Edited 3. As you're going through, you might find that there are some layers you think you can maybe do without. For example, those daffodil stems. You could do them and stick them on still, but they're not really doing a lot for when we're making this small. The only one that really notices is this one where it shows in front of the leaf here. The other two, I think you could probably get away with deleting them. It looks good on the big design because we can use the foam squares to pop them out, but we're not doing that as much on this one, so I'm going to delete those. That one I'll keep, so I'll just hide that one. And then again, we've got the 4 sections. Combine and weld. Take out those 2 tiny gaps. Arrange, center back. And that needs to go above that daffodil. And I'll call it Edited 4. Now this one in particular does have a lot. We're now moving on to ones that is just 2 pieces, but we can still weld them together. Take out that tiny gap. And then you can just work through them as much as you need to. Just keep looking. And once I've done this, I think this might be the last one. It's not quite lining up right. Combine, weld. Contour out that one little gap. Send it to the back. And put into place. Alright, so now looking up, it's all the individual flowers. I don't think there's anything else that comes in sections. For some of my giant signs, you will have bigger sections that come a bit further up. Again, it just depends on the particular design. And now we can check everything by turning it on one at a time. This is what we've got. And then you can just turn on everything else. And this helps you see as you're going along if you have any other parts that you think might be problematic, either because they're too small or if you do find any other bits that come in separate pieces that you want to join together. But this is all looking fine. I'm just going to go through and do them all so you can see just how many pieces there are. These blossom flowers, these bits in the middle, I thought they were going to not cut at all at the small size, but actually the Cricut did them beautifully. The hardest bit was sticking them on because they were so small. You could do the same thing that we did with the dog eyes in the previous step and cut these middle bits out of the next piece as a hole in the middle and then do a bright pink piece to stick behind. That would make it easier, but there are quite a few of them to do. They look like they probably are actually the same flower, so you might just be able to do it once and then duplicate it. And we got all these pieces of the flowers. This is all looking absolutely fine to be left as is. And there we go, that's the giant sign. We would then need to add some text, and rather than cut this from cardstock, if you're doing it really small, I think it would be easier to cut the text from heat transfer vinyl or even adhesive vinyl to put onto your cardstock instead. That tends to cut better when it's really thin than cardstock does. And also because if it's vinyl, if your letters are separate, you can just put them all on in one go and it will be way easier. So let's do that, and I'll actually show you how to do the heat transfer vinyl on the cardstock. Go into text, and what shall we write on it? The original big one said, "Welcome to our home." I'm going to do lots of writing. Let's change this. There's a font I really like. Can I remember the name of it right now? No. That culinary one looks quite pretty. I don't like that W. I'm going to have it say "have a wonderful day." I don't like that W. I've remembered the name of the font. It's called Double Whipped. There you go. That looks like Wonderful, not wonderful. Okay, I don't like the F. Not going to choose that one. DJ Fleur is a nice font too. This one, all the letters are separate, but that's fine if we're doing it from vinyl because we're not going to have to stick each one on individually like we would if we were cutting it from card. I quite like that. Okay, I'm going to add the "have a" because it will fit. Have a wonderful day. I'll make the letters a little bit closer together. Just a little bit. And then I'll do this from a heat transfer vinyl, so I will need to mirror and remember to mirror this one. This is the only one I'll need to mirror. Mirror means to cut it back to front, like you're looking at it in a mirror, back to front, backwards. Because with heat transfer vinyl, that's how you cut, and then once it's ironed on, it will look the right way. I know I will forget to mirror, so I'm going to cheat and do it now by clicking flip and then flip horizontal. That gives it the mirror image, and now when I get to this text, I won't have to remember to mirror it. I'll just need to remember to cut it from the heat transfer vinyl and not cardstock. This would now all be ready to cut. Let's click on make and just show the next step. So this is how it looks, all these little pieces. You can change the paper size. This is great for using up your scraps of card because we're doing it small. So maybe if you had a strip of white And then you also had an extra bit that was kind of shaped down here. You can stick different shapes of your colour from your scraps to the mat and then drag around to see. It might be easier if you set it to 12 by 12, even if you're not using 12 by 12 cardstock, because then, for example, if I had, let's say, 3 scraps of white, I could use them by putting them on my mat and then looking at my mat and looking at the screen and matching this up so that I know it's going to be covered by my scrap. And then rather than cutting into a brand new sheet of my white card, I could do it from 3 offcuts left over from other projects. And this is one of the absolute best ways to utilize your scrap pile, in my opinion, by doing layered designs really, really small. It's a great crafting challenge. They come out beautifully and you're using your scraps at the same time. So that is definitely a win. Here are some tips for cutting cardstock really small with your Cricut machine. Tip 1 is to pay attention to your Cricut mat. I recommend either a new or nearly new light blue, light grip cutting mat, or a green standard cut mat that is losing its stick a little bit. Those will be best for your cardstock, or an off-brand Cricut mat. Now, I would never normally recommend off-brand mats. I've tried lots of different ones and I always find that they just don't compare to the Cricut ones. The Cricut ones, in my opinion, from where I've used it, they keep their stick longer. They have better stick on them, so they are a little bit stickier. And also they don't smell, whereas some of the off-brand ones do have a little bit of a solventy, gluey smell on them. However, when you're cutting stuff really small, actually, these off-brand ones tend to do quite nicely, because if you use a new mat, it's not as sticky as a new Cricut band mat, which means it's still wonderfully sticky to put your card on. But when it comes to taking off your teeny tiny little pieces, remember just how small we're going. Having one that's a little bit less tacky, but still perfectly clean is really helpful. So there's a couple of different options for the different mats to use. My second tip is to use a brayer or a scraper tool to really push down your card. The blade is going to be moving such small movements that it might end up moving your card about, particularly if you're using little scraps. So to help stop that from happening, this mat's a little bit too dirty actually for cutting small designs. It's in need of a wash really. But what you can do is when you put your card on, if you've got a brayer tool, which is a little roller, oops, one of my hairs there, go over it really firmly, get it super stuck down. You can also use your scraper tool. If you don't have a brayer, go down there. Or you can use a rolling pin from the kitchen, or even a tin of baked beans, or something heavy that rolls to get this super stuck down. Tip 3 is to take advantage of sticky areas on the mat. Now you probably will find, especially if you're like me and you don't use a lot of 12 by 12 material, that there are some bits on the mat that stay stickier than others because they don't get used as much. For example, I tend to use A4 cards, so it goes down here, and I never use this section up here. So when I just showed you in Design Space moving the white flowers and things about, what you could do to take advantage of the extra sticky bits is make sure you position your scraps over those cleaner sticky bits. So I could put this on like that, for instance, and put my main images here, give it a good brayer. It just means that you're taking advantage of bits that you might not normally get to try, and that will help keep everything nice and stuck instead of moving about. Tip 4 is to do with your cut settings when you're sending it to your Cricut machine. If you find that you're cutting something small and it's tearing the card, then try it again and use a lighter cut setting. So maybe you are using heavy cardstock, try medium instead, or even light cardstock. You might find that doesn't cut all the way through. So if you are changing to a lighter setting than what you would normally use, then I recommend when it comes out the machine, before you eject your mat, just peel up the card a little bit and see if it's cut through. If it hasn't, then press the go button again. It will repeat the cut in exactly the same place, and that should cut it all through. If you're using a particularly thick material, again, just check it's cut through before you eject your mat. Unfortunately, you can't do that trick on the Joy or the Joy Xtra because that only gives you the option to eject, not recut. But if you've got the Explore Air or the Maker models, you can certainly do that just to make sure it goes through properly. Tip number 5 is to use a high quality card. Remember, cutting things super duper small is hard for our poor little Cricut, so we want to make it as easy as possible by giving it a high quality cardstock to cut. So you want to choose solid core cardstock for the most part if you can, which is where it's the same colour all the way through, so there's no kind of white layer in the middle. It's coloured all the way through the card. Also try to choose card that doesn't have a lot of visible fibres in it. So recycled card isn't great for doing small things. It has a lot more fibres in it. It's a very fibrous card. And all of those fibres is an opportunity for the blade to snag on all these teeny tiny little spaces. Some brands of card that I really like and I found cut really, really well at a small size is this pack from Papermania. It's premium textured cardstock, so the card's got a lovely linen effect texture on it. This one's A4, it's 216 GSM. I get it on Amazon and quite often they do put it on offer. It's really nice. There are 75 sheets in here. Each one's a different colour, which is really great for variety. And if you're cutting lots of little things, that's wonderful. But you only get one sheet of each colour. So, maybe get 2 packs if you're going to get this, just so that if anything does go wrong, you do have another bit of the same colour. Another brand, which is one of my all-time favourites, is Sizzix cardstock. Again, this has a linen effect, textured effect on it. This one is another multi-pack, and I'm not sure what thickness this is. 216 GSM, so it's the same as the Papermania one. There's some information on that. You can get this on Amazon or you can get it from craftstash.co.uk, and I'm sure there's probably lots of other places you can get it. Another brand that works well small is Craft Perfect, which you can get from Tonic Studios, which is an online website. You can also buy it from craftstash.co.uk. That's nice because it comes in individual colour packs, so you get 10 sheets of a particular colour for about £2.50, so it's actually really well priced, and that means you can just buy the colours you need. The multi-packs are great, but I normally find that I use up all of a particular colour and never any of the others, so I've bought quite a few of these packs over my crafting lifetime. I hardly ever use the pinks for some reason, so I have loads and loads of these pinks, but I always use the yellows, so I've got no yellows, which is why multi-packs aren't always the best option. But those Craft Stash ones, Craft Perfect from Tonic Studios, they do the individual colours. But just have a look, see what's available to you, try what you've already got. You don't know how well it's going to cut until you try it. And if you're using a scrap bit of card that you've been keeping for months and months or even years, because it might come in handy one day, if it tears and rips, is it really the end of the world? You weren't going to use it anyway if you've had it that long. So just let it go and try again with a different one if it doesn't work. Tip number 6 is if it is still tearing, you've tried everything and it is still tearing one particular thing, no matter how many times you try it, there are a couple of extra things you can do. One is to move it on the Cricut mat, so go back and edit the placement. It might be that you've got a little bit of debris on your mat, which is causing the blade to kind of snag, and that is what's causing the tear. Another thing you can try is rotating it. Sometimes the blade just has problems with something one particular way. If you rotate it 90 degrees for absolutely no rhyme or reason, it can start cutting it wonderfully. So just give it a try, move things about and rotate them, and just see if that helps. Also, take out your Cricut blade. It might be that if something is ripping over and over again, that you've got a little bit of card stuck to your blade. So you can take it out your machine, have a look. If there's any dust or bits of card stuck on it, then use a dry, clean, soft paintbrush to just blow all of that debris away. You can also clean your blade by rolling up a ball of tinfoil, sticking your blade in there a few times. That doesn't sharpen your blade, but it does clean it a little bit. But I prefer the paintbrush option because then you can actually see it being cleaned as you go along. And finally, tip number 7 is don't get frustrated, especially if you're new to cutting things this teeny tiny. It's not as easy for your Cricut to do as it is cutting the big things. So give it some patience if it's not always right. And just remember, crafting is supposed to be fun. So breathe, just have a moment, and then try again if it's going wrong. And I promise you will get there. We're now going to jump back to my giant sign, or not so giant sign anymore. Here's my text, which I cut out from heat transfer vinyl, and you can see it cut it wonderfully. It's really nice. But it would have cut this from cardstock just fine. But I really wouldn't have fancied gluing each of those letters on individually at that size. They are pretty small. Whereas if we're using heat transfer vinyl, we can put it all on in one go and know it's all going to look great. I've got my white bit here, which is where the text will go. And then I've stuck the other bits together already, and I just left this one to last. So you can sort of get an idea of where this is going to go. Let's add it there, and then move this out the way. Actually, that's not going to work because it's too big. Let's do it the other way around. Let's put that on and just check. It needs to go left a little bit. There, that looks nice. Okay, I've heated up my mini press. It's on the 2nd level. And put a Teflon sheet over to protect everything. And for putting it on cardstock, you don't need to press it as long for if you're doing it on clothing or fabric. It's only just got to stick to your card. And of course, because it's card, you don't want to get it too hot because, it's paper, basically. So just a few seconds should be fine. And if it doesn't stick, we can always do it again for a few seconds. I'm just going to go over, keep the mini press moving, go over all the text on there. I've got my pressing pillow to protect my work surface. That's the grey thing you can see. And I'm being quite quick with my movements. I don't want my card to warp under the heat. There we go. Let's see if that's enough. Looks like it. Oh, not quite. That Y is still not quite coming off. I can't remember if this is a warm or cool peel heat transfer vinyl. It doesn't have any instructions in it. Oh, haven't quite done yet. Ooh, we've just messed that up. This is me being impatient and peeling up before I should. There we go. Right, my N and my F are a little bit messed up. Just try and get that end back on. There we are. Whew. Now, my card hasn't bowed really. If yours did under the heat, what you can do is turn it over, put your Teflon sheet back over and just press it really quickly. Just go over it like that on the back, and that can help to straighten it out again. So that's looking fine. So let's turn off that mini press, and then all I would have left to do is to stick that on there. I might use some foam squares to make it stand out, and then put that one on top. Here it is all stuck together with the heat transfer vinyl. I'm trying to pick it up, it's a little bit fragile. And that's really nice, got a bit of sparkle on it. I maybe haven't quite stuck it straight, but overall very happy with how that turned out. And it's just nice to see it next to the big one. I'm going to have to zoom out on my camera. Here we go, still going, there. So this is the original one, and here's my tiny one. I think I could have gone even smaller on it, but this is a really nice size. It would look good on a card, a greetings card, or in a smaller frame. If you wanted to prop it up, you'd have to just cut these bottom bits so it's got a flat edge to it. But overall, there we go, we've got large and we've got little. And that matches in with my grandma gnome with her knitting, big and little. I hope you enjoyed this video on how you can cut layered designs really, really tiny with your Cricut machine. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel for loads more Cricut tips and cardstock tutorials. Thank you for watching. Bye!